Just going to explain what I'm doing now. I've been able to get one of these, which is the fan support off of a Cummins. I think it's actually off a Fast Track, but it's got the bearings all preset in there. So what I'm going to do now is see about mounting this stuff up onto there. I think it'll just take a little bit of fabbing work on here, and I think the bolt service is slightly different, but I can re-drill bolts, that's okay. What I'm going to do now is just mock it all up onto here and see actually if that part aligns properly on the engine that way. So that's my fan, that's my pulley, that's the old bracket, that's the new bracket, and that's my brew. Okay, so what I've got to try and do now is align this hub, which was never meant for this engine, for a Fast Track. Line it up that way, and that way, in relation to where it needs to be, where the fan needs to be in the radiator, which sits here. However, there's one thing, I was measuring the depth where it needs to be, so that being on there needs to line up with that bottom pulley down here. Don't know if you can see it on the camera. So I used the edge of the engine block as a datum point to measure out of, longitudinally, if you will. And from there to the inside of the first rib on the main pulley is 124 millimeters. From there to the inside of the first rib of that setup is 124 millimeters. I mean, so you're probably going to say, well, yeah, of course, there's some standardized parts in there. I don't think that's the case. This is just an add-on that this engine didn't really have much of. They're all parts off of different brands. That's a Cummins, this is New Holland, this is John Deere. And I think like my old blue spindle for that was a lot longer, you know, it's probably like that long. So I'm not sure that it is supposed to be standardized size. I think it's just chance. Could be wrong, but I'm still standing by. That's pure chance that it's 124 millimeters, bang on, perfectly in line with the bottom pulley. I'm just going to say that I've had some real good luck there, because I could do with some good luck on this build. So what I've got to do now is, I've got a laser level. I don't get that till tomorrow. I could set that up there and find the dead center of where the center of the hub needs to be, and then I can work on fabricating around that then, based on where that center is. I think it's going to end up being horizontal like that. And the top two pins, I have a bracket coming off of the holes in the top there. There's some unused screw holes there. And then I'm not sure what else to do. Maybe the plate comes round like a U shape like that, and fixes on. I don't know. I'm not quite sure where the centre is yet. I think the centre is somewhere, as in wherever we are here, somewhere around just the side of this bolt. But until I get a laser pointer, and that laser pointer, I can just set it up there and keep that in place. I don't know where yet it's best to position this. That'll be tomorrow's job. Today's job, I'm gonna try and re-drill them holes. Now, unfortunately, I thought I was onto a winner. The holes in there, and the holes in there, and the holes in there would all just line up. Those two do. Which way are we talking? Yeah, those two do. So those are standardized holes, but this doesn't. So what I'm going to have to do is just re-drill these holes, some 4 new holes in there, and 4 new holes in there, but also bore that center hub out, so it sits on the spigot properly in the center. So that's today's job, and that's what I'm going to do now. So just an update. I've drilled out the middle of, or bored out the middle of the fan, so it sits on that spigot, on that boss, very snug now. And then I've measured and re-drilled 4 new holes, so that sits on the hub properly, I've got to then do the same with this. But because the hole in the middle won't fit on the boss, what I can now do, because I kept the old holes in the fan, is just bolt them up and then just re-drill through this one, and it should assemble as a full job lot done. Check this for an amazing alignment tool. So I've had to bolt the pulley to the fan to centralize it, because like I say, this hub won't centralize it for me. So I've used the bolt holes and then I've lined it up as close as I can see. There's a little, like these bolt holes are slightly bigger than the fan's bolt holes, which I've made to be almost exactly the bolt size. But what I'm doing is, I don't know if you can see, there's a gap between, so I've just got that on there, and as I spin that round, I'm just double checking. I'm fairly confident it's right, but I think that gap just got ever so slightly bigger, like 0.5 mil bigger. So yeah, I'm just checking to see is what I've done is actually correct. So I can probably just slacken one of the bolts off and just give it a little tap with the hammer in the direction I want it to go. So far, I'd say I'd actually be pretty happy with that. I wouldn't say there's much off balance, considering these old blades are probably not equal to start with. So, and I wouldn't say there's a massive amount of weight floating about in that being offset, but the closer I can get it, obviously the more accurate the better. And then once that's done, I can run the drill through them holes there, and that everything will bolt up together then. So that's drilled through properly now, and while I was down at the other workshop, I just got my brother to weld, like tack, not completely weld, but just make sure that and that are glued together. Because while the alignment's proper now, I'd like to just keep the alignment correct. With this one having a bigger bore in it, it means it's only relying on the bolts to get its alignment right on the hub. And if, let's say, after a few months of running, it's been running just on the, like, you know, putting the pressure on the bolts, it may knacker the thread, and I wouldn't know if I was to undo it and this ends up slipping in a few months' time. You know, after the engine's been run, if it slips down a couple of millimeters and I end up bolting it back on, well, it'll be out of alignment then. So I thought, while it's all aligned, just glue it together, then it's done properly then, isn't it? Okay, so that's it. Now I've got the hub, pulley, fan on there properly. I can now work out where to position it. I think I'm going to have to get the grinder in and cut some of this out so that it can fit around that water return area on the top of the thing. But yeah, one step closer. Call it a day today, but tomorrow come back. And hopefully, if I can get this, I've ordered, by the way, like a laser level, you know, like the DIY ones where you put it down and it finds itself center and it puts like a crosshair. And that means I can, like, oh, you'll see it in later videos if it turns up. It means I can put a laser dot where the center of the fan needs to be, and then that, and I can position it properly in place and then be like, oh, okay, then I can look at making the bracket based off of that. Well, that's tomorrow's job now. Okay, so the plan is I've got to make up a bracket that holds the other bracket that holds the fan hub here. However, if I was to have the radiator on here and try and hold it in place, it'll be a bit khaki-handed and I've got no real reference points. to work from. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to have put that fan, just mounted it on a sturdy frame there. I'm going to offer the radiator up to it using some shims and whatever, just to kind of like hold it off the ground and get it positioned just right. And that way I can use the laser pointer to measure the distance between the center of the doopity-doop to the I'm going to use the brackets off there as my datum points, and then that way I can use that measurement to go back on the tractor and then use those same datum points from there and there to measure where it needs to be here. Again, using the laser pointer so that, whoop, do need a bit of a tidy up. Yeah, using the laser pointer so that I can hold it in position and I can work out then, there and then. I've got my vertical and my horizontal sorted. I've got my depth sorted already. I know where that needs to be, and I can do it all without the radiator on. That's the key part at the minute. So that's what I'm trying to do. You're probably going to say to me, Tom, stop. You're making this all more complicated than it needs to be. And yeah, you're probably right. I just haven't thought of another way to do it yet. So this is just how I'm doing it. I'm doing it my way. And I've got a bit of a grip on it my way. So I'm going to do it this way. I've got that little car jack there so I can have some control over the height of the front. And then I use little washers to give it tilt. And I can use that to give me my true vertical and horizontal plumb lines. So that's what I'm going to set up now. Right, so where I'm at now is that represents the center point of my fan there. I've got them exactly level where I want them. I've got it set up so this is, you can't see it very well because of the dark, but that's set up there. So I can now take the measurements from, well, I have taken my measurements from the foot there, which I'll use as my datum for the whole thing, to that line there, and same that side. Well, they're both 371, so I know that's relatively accurate. I can also now take that 371, reset up the laser level on the front of the tractor, and I can work off the fitting on the bottom there to 371, set the laser level up, and I don't need the radiator now on the set on the tractor for me to know where the center of it is, because I've got the measurements there, and I've gone from the center of the pinholes to the center line there, which you would think is halfway, but actually the way it sits in the shroud isn't halfway. It's a couple of millimeters to one side, but that's okay. I think I can probably, I've got some wiggle room there, so I probably will go exactly halfway between those bolt holes on the tractor. So now I'm going to set up that laser level on the tractor, and try and get the hub lined up to the middle of there, which I can hold with my hand and make up a template for a bracket for it now. Well, I have just run into another problem. So you can just see the groove on the water pump pulley there as to where the belt needs to run. If I line the top pulley up with it close enough, the fan doesn't pass the pulley. How annoying is that? So that's just the one thing that I didn't measure. I didn't anticipate it, if I'm honest. I just thought there's enough depth there for it to cover, but it's just another thing. When I mocked it up, I've mocked it up like that way with the pulley, this way, whatever, but not all kind of together, because it's only just in the last attempt gone together. So that bit of weld there that I've got just holding the two together, I'll just have to grind that off. That spacer there, the bolt pattern's slightly off, so I'll re-drill that. I'll put that spacer in between there and bolt that back onto the hub. Hopefully that'll push it out far enough. I'll need longer bolts because the bolts I've just bought for it are now going to be too short. So just to go over the issue I've got again, I need to move that forward by at least 14 mil. 14 mil gives me clearance. I've got this spacer here, which I can utilize, put that in between, fine. However, if you see the spigot on the front part, which is the fan, fits neatly onto the hub, but the back part doesn't. If I move the fan forward by 14 millimeters, that spigot won't fit on the hub. This pulley doesn't anyway, hence why I welded it in place so that it's got the support of the fan, and that 14 millimeters brings the fan too far away from that boss on there. So what I might have to do is jump in the lathe and make a proper spacer that sits on there and sits in there, and that way it can sit centrally and not just rely on the bolts to centralize it.